Okay. Hi, everyone. It looks like we're successfully live. So it's always just kind of a little scary moment there when that's all happening, but you all were so quiet. I was like totally expecting chat while that was going on. But so I'm just so thrilled. Thank you all for tuning in. We have several people tuning in on different platforms. We, of course, have the webinar, and it's so lovely to see so many friends and family and students listed here. And welcome to all of those who are joining us live on Facebook through Pagination. I am thrilled to present these three incredibly talented women who I am privileged to know through the Pacific University MFA family. And it really is a family. And I was thinking about that a lot today as I was reading a lot of interviews with Marvin Bell, who was originally going to be joining us in our reading, and who now we are dedicating our reading to. Tonight, we want to honor him, and I think we're honoring him by being writers, by being together, by sharing our work, by talking about the importance of art, and just by being here. So I don't know, it was just a lovely privilege to spend the day kind of reading all about his life, reading the different things he has to say about his family, about his teaching, and about his writing practice, and about his beliefs in poetry. So I want to introduce really fast and then more formally here in a minute, our three guests. So I'm thrilled to present the poets Jamaica Baldwin, Michelle Bidding, and Raquel Neve-Midbar, who is joining us. So we're kind of like spread out all over. So Jamaica's with me, we're in the central time zone. Michelle is zooming in from California, and Raquel is joining us from Israel, where it is now 3 a.m. her time. So pretty darn incredible. I'm still sort of amazed by this and impressed and excited. And it feels like a big privilege that this can even happen. So to begin, we were talking about how we want to honor Marvin Bell, the famous poet, beloved, especially beloved in our community, but of course beloved beyond. His long legacy of work and teaching has touched so many people. One of the things that I loved reading about today was just reading the long list of his students who have now become the poets that influence so many of us, including Joy Harjo, Dennis Johnson. I mean, just the list is like incredible. It's sort of the who's who, including the three women on screen with me right now. So if you're not familiar with Marvin Bell, I would point you maybe to a recent profile that was done about him in the New York Times about his dead man poetry, which is just incredible and life-changing to read. He has the longest list of accolades of anyone. I mean, his Poetry Foundation page, you just keep scrolling. But I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of his legacy, you know, his continuing legacy as our teacher. He taught for 40 years for the Iowa Writers Workshop. And of course, we all know him as a beloved professor at the Pacific University Low Residency MFA. One of my favorite quotes that I actually had the honor of introducing Marvin Bell when I came back to Pacific as an MC, which was one of the most amazing and terrifying weeks of my life because I had to introduce all of my mentors who I'm completely in awe of. But this was one of the quotes that I shared when I introduced him, and it's still just, it's one of my favorite ones. He says of his Dead Man poems, "I've noticed that they engage a kind of reader who has an extra mental energy. Maybe I should say one who wants to boogie and think at the same time." And I just love that because it feels very Marvin Bell, like boogieing, like, and thinking at the same time. But one of the things I wanted to start with, which I feel like will introduce his three students, is his quote about teaching. So he says, "As for teaching the gifted, I can tell you a funny story. A few former students from years back got together and decided to have an event at AWP in which they would each talk about me. They all told a version of the same story. Each of them had asked me some serious question about poetry, and I said, let's grab a cup of coffee. We'd go to a room in the student union and talk for an hour, and a couple of days later, they would realize I had never answered the question. There's a reason for that. The kinds of questions that are asked about poetry writing, if they're answered, they make the poet smaller. They can be used as occasions for conversation, absolutely, but if they're answered with any kind of authority, they make the poet smaller. I'm always trying to get the poets to write with abandon, to be more of themselves. And I'd sort of love later to hear about what you think about that as Marvin students. I'm going to share one more quote, and then we'll move into the readings. One thing that he says about poetry is this: poetry is a manifestation of a life. It can show us the diversity of cultures and of individual inner wiring, and teaches empathy. It can express what conventional language cannot, and perhaps even be life-saving. On the other hand, it's just poetry. So I love that. He also says if we're talking art, poetry should be something that happens to you. So on that note, we're going to let poetry happen to us right now. So I want to invite Rachel to be featured on the screen. So while our other poets are sort of logging off their cameras, I should say, not signing off, I want to feature Rachel here and give her formal bio. So Rachel Neve-Midbar's collection, Song of Birds, has won the 2018 Patricia Bibby First Book Award and was published by DeMott Press. She is also the author of the chapbook What the Light Reveals, and her work has appeared in Crab Orchard Review, Spillway, Prairie Schooner, the Georgia Review, and many other publications. And later we're going to hear about the latest project that she's been working on. And one other notable thing is that during all of this writing, Rachel is also pursuing her PhD at UCLA. So Rachel, thank you so much for being here. I have missed you. I have missed our community. It feels like coming home to be here. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, Jen, thank you so much. And thank you to Pagination Bookshop for hosting us tonight. It is an honor to be in the room with these three women who I love like sisters. And it's incredible. I think this technology is incredible, as much as we, all feel like we're a little bit too tied to our computers during the pandemic. Being able to be with all of you tonight is quite amazing. And thinking about Marvin, when I first applied to Pacific, I wrote to, I was very nervous because I was, older, and I still don't have a bachelor's degree. And I wrote to Dorianne Lux and said, what's happening with my application? She said, it's in the hands of Marvin Bell. And I went then to look up, who is this Marvin Bell? And of course, my jaw dropped down to my knees. And it was thrilling to think that someone who had touched so many poets was reading my work. Later, when I got into Pacific, Marvin was my first workshop teacher. And then in the summer of 2014, Marvin was my thesis director through my last semester. That was the summer that I got divorced after 30 years, and the summer where there was a very big and very difficult war, the Gazan war here in Israel. Marvin wrote to me every 2 days, I think, during that time, giving me so much support and so much love. And later, one of the actual namesake, Song of Birds, is a piece that is the coda of this book that's called, originally it was called Dear Marvin. It's a series of letters to Marvin Bell during the war that I took some from just real life correspondence of things that I was writing. When it turned out that Marvin wasn't going to be reading with us tonight, I went to my mentor, David St. John at USC, where I'm a PhD student. and asked him to choose a poem, and he chose the poem Bees Green Going to Yellow. So here I'm going to start my reading with a poem by Marvin Bell. This year, I'm raising the emotional ante, putting my face in the leaves to be stepped on, seeing myself among them, that is likening leaf vein to artery, leaf to flesh, the passage of leaf in autumn to the passage of autumn, branch tip and winter spaces, to possibilities and possibility, to God, even on East 61st Street, in the blousy city of New York. Someone has planted a ginkgo because it has leaves like fans, like hands, hand leaves and sex, those lovely Chinese hands on the sidewalks, so far from delicacy, or even perhaps another gender of ginkgo. Do we see them? No one ever treated us so gently as these green going to yellow hands, fanned out where we walk. No one ever fell down so quietly and lay where we look and lay where we would look when we were tired or embarrassed. And so bowed down by humanity that we had to watch out lest our shoes stumble, and looked down, not to look up, until something looked like parts of people where we were walking. We have no experience to make us see the ginkgo or any other tree. And in our admiration for whatever grows tall and outlives us, we look away or look at the middle of things, which would not be our way if we truly thought we were gods. So before I start reading, I just want to send a shout out to Marvin. I don't know if he's watching. I hope if he's not, he'll see a recording of this. And I want to wish him refuah shlema, full recovery. We need you, Marvin, and we need your words. We need your happiness. We need your wild, wild, wild acceptance and love of poetry in this world. So get well soon and get back to us soon. So I'm going to read you, Salam of Birds came out in January, just in time for the pandemic. And I'm going to read you a few poems from this book. I'll start with the first poem in the book, Drive. We know nothing, only that the curtains fly like sails. The earth keeps spinning, tilts over and back. Rains come, leaves shrivel and die. The snow gathers, then melts away. And still I smell the cigarette from the car in front of me. And night blooming jasmine, like a woman I once loved, and who sometimes I still dream about. A cloud of pewter smoke billows out of Husan, the explosion of a car or a house or a life. The light changes from yellow to red. Soldiers at the checkpoint stand death chill, wax statues, watch us go by with lifeless eyes. A dog stands at attention next to the road, his black ears pointed at the sky. So the title of the book is Salam of Birds. That is a quote from Mahmoud Darwish, who was the father of Palestinian poetry, an amazing humanist, an amazing scholar and poet. And I found the quote in a small sonnet of his in poems translated by Fadi Judah, and of course it means the expansion of peace. The book is about the book is a call for peace. for sure, but it's also what it's like to be a woman and a mother in a place of a war-torn country, a place of that's being disrupted. Town square. In most towns, you'll find a woman in the corner of the square, propped like a doll. She has no voice unless someone's hand is under her shirt. And if you chose to photograph her, you'll see she has no mouth. And if you look long enough, no arms either. Though she's fed and dressed by the good women who buzz and cluck, put on her face, carefully cover her hair, tie a wedding ring on a scarlet ribbon around her neck. She sits alone, eyes tight, eyes bright. What else is there? Uncoupling. Two train cars releasing each other, one arm lifted, the other dropped into the clang and black stench of the yard. A barbed hook unclasped from a fish's lip before he's cast back into the river. The latch raised on a gate, the front entryway lock disengaging bolts from metal bolts, a tire hoisted from its hub, a chain fence marking a closed military zone unlinked, Velcro ripped from a flak jacket, the clatter of a clip set free from an M16. Soldiers transferring people out of a Gush Katif synagogue as they bear the weight of their own tears. The thread pulled from a needle's eye. Pencil marks erased from a letter. The slash in arithmetic that makes everything less. The unbuckling of a belt. A hook unfastened, the buttons on a blouse unfixed from their stitched eyes, a zipper slowly unzipped down a long and naked back. The shift of his hips that pulls him out of me and over to his own side of the bed. The large expanse of his back that faces me each night. One of the things about living in Israel and raising the kids here is that ancient history surrounds you all the time. We went for a short period around 2001 to live for a couple of years in America. And every time that they would be taken and shown a bell, and it was like, look, the bell is 250 years old. My kids would say so, because here you could, wherever you go, you're touching antiquities that are thousands of years old. One example of this is that I was living in the Judean desert, and there was a natural spring coming out of the desert, and I would go there every day and write. And one day a group of schoolgirls was coming through, and so in order to retain my quiet, I moved away from them, and I looked down. All of a sudden I realized I was standing in somebody's house, this little house that had two rooms, and it was just a kind of a ruin. Just the back wall was there. You could see where a fireplace had been. And I went afterwards and asked the park rangers how old the house was, and they said that it was from the Byzantine period. I thought a lot about the woman who must have lived in that house and looked out every day at this beautiful natural spring. And I wrote a poem for her called Finding Shlom Sion. Even on days like this, when the desert is couched in daylight, inside what is left of your ruined house, scarred as a nail-torn palm, here where the missile pecks at a Christ's thorn, edible now in fall. and you sleep inside the sound of moving water, the start and stop of Mayim Pe'umim, Mayim Lifamim, or a winter rain that drowns itself into a desert flow, growth rough as a husband's unshaven cheek. And I sit beside you here, on stones worn soft as skin, here, right here, within the chirp and settled seed, you 1,500 years older than me, and your hair still glossy under a white scarf. We eat from the same pitted pear. We marry within the smell of this pool where your poems are born alongside mine. River over rocks, eddy through the reeds, sun on our faces, and the crowded clumps of newly grown watercress, the common caper, Varthamia, and even the golden drop that pecks between the creases of stone. Your fingers on my lips, light as wings, here, right here, where the desert rests, occupied still in this scarred daylight. Desert rain. Your tongue in my hair, in my mouth, your mouth, the circle, the complete meaning of round, an egg held for the length of a prayer. Your skin, your skin. Let me touch the soft pouch of your belly, smell the smell of your fir trees, rusty and fragrant with fire. We are nothing more than what we cherish. A nightjar left to beat in the canyon of my palms. I am ready now to sleep with your braid in my mouth. For you to be the wife of my wife, or even my wife. You warm against me, your breath deep on my neck. That I would hold you when the desert rain wakes us, that we could talk quietly together about the melded meanings of rain, its dams, its flows, what it gives, what it takes away. Then I could lift the covers for you, tuck you close into my lap, my arms around you, each of your breasts, and I open wide under my hand, my nose in your hair, and behind your ears, your most human smell, crushed mushrooms and old apples. Let me lick you there. Glass in a hailstorm. These days, mercy is all we can ask for. A finger here, a finger there, little fingers on my cheeks, waking me to the Sunday morning nightmare. 8 a.m., number 18 bus explodes again. Should I dress the girls, send them off to school? These girls who taught themselves to dance in gas masks, jumping on the bed, falling back into a jumble of pillows and air filters. The window behind them buttoned in a masking tape cross. We walked to shul in the quiet of Shabbat, past the burned out bus, its battery acid smell filling the atmosphere. And these girls, my girls, their hands soft as the air at dawn, my high heels clicking the pavement, the morning chill fingering my hair. Soon enough, they too will wake to the pop of a stun grenade, learn to run long distances in mud, make their way guided by stars, their lives fragile as glass in a hailstorm. Okay, just two more poems. Memorial. I watch you call the names of your dead. Each forms deep in your throat, falls from your mouth like chess pieces or toy soldiers. Even the children posed with stones or guns, everyone ready for battle. The names tumble to the lectern, perch there, despite the hard currents of your sorrow, your tears, my tears, splintered and spilling from tabletop to floor. Yes, name your dead, each who fell in grace or not, in innocence or not, and I will name mine. When I name names, am I counting doves or darkness? Our lists swell, the dead crowding in, anger plain on their faces, even as we clean their bodies, prepare the earth, all of us greedy for some further fury, to claw at borders, dispatch these names into the void, blame clutched in their talons, the language of this conflict so easy in our mouths, so easy. But what lies on the other side of the mirror if we choose to walk through? To a place where the sounds of the wounded are lost in the whispered sand, or we can only hear water, a river, or perhaps just the clank of dishes in the sink, the soft sound of water washing away the last of a good meal shared together. Lay with me, back to back. Don't you see we are two sides of the same hair? Please, we can do this together. You hold the amulet while I carry you across the divide. And I'm going to end with a short poem. And I want to dedicate this poem to everyone, everyone during the pandemic um, who is not in their regular room, who is not in their regular place, who is home and surrounded by family 24/7 in a very irregular way, scared to go out and buy groceries, scared to stay in. We are all nervous. I want to dedicate this to all the people who are suffering with COVID and wish everybody like Marvin to get well soon. These are really hard days. And we have to ask what we're supposed to do to get through it. But this is just a small poem in honor of that, of what we're all carrying right now. Baggage. I know the storm is coming when the hills are bathed in a yellow light. And I carry a perfume of each memory, their heat and heavy eyes, like walking barefoot through snow. The smell of my soul matching the smell of all souls. And the bare trees spread like coral stretch marks against the fallow sky. And I know all women carry everything they own in the dark bags under their eyes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jen and Pagination Bookstore, and thrilling to be here with Jamaica and Michelle and all of you listening. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. Boy, I felt that last poem really hit. Wow. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And I so appreciate that. And yeah, I think I speak for everyone when we say thank you for the for the gift of that, those images and that writing and just that compassion and acknowledgement of this collective experience that we're all going through. It's an honor to listen to your work. I just thank you. I realized that I got way too excited introducing everybody to explain that at the end, after our three poets read, we are going to have a conversation with some questions and answers. So if you in the audience here in the webinar would like to ask a question to any particular poet or to all the poets, If you travel down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little dialogue, kind of looks like a comment icon that says Q&A, and you are welcome to submit questions. I am the only one that sees that, so you can feel free to submit questions as the reading is going on, and I'll wait until the end to the Q&A session and then share those questions with the writers. And same goes for those of you watching on Facebook. I encourage you to ask questions, and I will share those with the writers when we enter our conversation after the readings. Thank you so much, Raquel. We're gonna now move to California and visit with Michelle. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. Zooming in from your gorgeous office, which I'm looking at and thinking I need a major redesign of my office at work, which does not look that fashionable whatsoever.
All my stuff.
It's beautiful. I love it. So I'm going to go ahead and share Michelle's formal bio here with you. Michelle Bidding's fourth collection, Broken Kingdom, won the Catamaran Prize and was named to Kirkus Review's Best of 2018. There it is. Her poems appear in the American Poetry Review, Narrative, Love's Executive Order, Tupelo Quarterly, and many other journals. Shortlisted for the 2020 Montreal International Poetry Award, a finalist in the 2019 Sonora Review and the new Millennium Flash Prose Contest. She won the 2018 Fischer Prize and Robert J. DeMott Awards. And she is a lecturer in creative writing and poetry at Loyola Marymount University and film studies at Ashford University. And it is just my honor to have you here, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Jen, for that introduction and for making this beautiful reading happen. Also for Raquel's gorgeous reading and leadership in helping to make all this happen in Jamaica. Such a privilege to be able to read with you, real treat. So, and Marvin Bell, who's not with us, who is such an important person in my life and my writing, my development as a writer. Of course, Pacific University, Oregon, think about it all the time. Try and go up there when I can. And I too did my thesis with Marvin. We also fought, and but there wasn't any way I wasn't going to work with him. So that did happen, and it changed my life, as all the mentors there have changed my life and really set me going. Yeah, like a fat gold watch. Okay. So yes, he also pushed me, as he pushes all his mentees, to write beyond what we imagine we can do, and to do that with abandon. So To Dorothy by Marvin Bell. You are not beautiful exactly. You are beautiful inexactly. You let a weed grow by the mulberry and a mulberry grow by the house. So close, in the personal quiet of a windy night, it brushes the wall and sweeps away the day till we sleep. A child said it, and it seemed true. Things that are lost are all equal. But it isn't true. If I lost you, the air wouldn't move, nor the tree grow. Someone would pull the weed, my flower. The quiet wouldn't be yours if I lost you. I'd have to ask the grass to let me sleep. No way we weren't going to read that poem, and it's my honor to have read it. So this is, Marvin always talks about being in conversation with each other in that community of talking to each other through art and poetry. So this is my response poem from my book, Broken Kingdom, that I've chosen to read to begin with. And it's to my to when my son, Emmett, who at this point was still Vera Rose, touched. You've got that half crown of raw silk daisies with the sun-poked centers wrapped around your head again, sparks and ribbons streaming, the lashes of winged creatures sketched into a blue journal you always carry. I don't know how we got so lucky to say we know you well when clearly you are from somewhere else, wherever extraterrestrials blossom, dotting forests like the white rabbit pages you inhabit. Like magic mushrooms, every surface your dark pen sprouts its ink. But I'm convinced that, aside from enough chicken nuggets and fries, which is pretty much all you ate the first 12 years of your life, enough soft garments, a sturdy roof, and fat blankets to shield the night's cruelest breeze. The greatest gift a being may be born with is to arrive a little touched, antenna like tiny organic blades stationed inside the ears and eyes and hands, which I suppose implies a kind of fierce fragility, a loony willingness to be opened and receive, to allow the earth's cosmic squirming to current your knuckle bones and throat, calling back to that strange, unearthly divide. What the great St. Vincent Millay meant in one of her finer broken moments when she said, God, I can push the grass apart and lay my finger on thy heart. This next poem is also from Broken Kingdom, and it was written one Saturday morning when I was doing a little writing, and I was also, I came across George Bernard Shaw's, this wicked piece, this little letter you may be familiar with, called She Would Have Enjoyed It. And it was a letter written to the actress, British actress, Mrs. Patrick Campbell. And in it, Shaw recounts his mother's funeral service with kind of humor and affection. So at the same time I came across this letter, my son Elijah and I were dealing with an avian funeral at home. So here it is. So it's titled, I went behind the scenes and found the Violet Coffin. Actually, it was an old red shoebox mined from the cave of a musty closet, and my son stood by as I lit a stub of sage over the puffed pink breast of a dead robin he'd found, supine and stiff on the backyard brick. Had it fallen from the purple crown of a nearby jacaranda? Maybe it was that shadow of a hawk I'd seen circling, eyeing nests clustered high in the arms of the eucalyptus. The roaring, feathery draft, honing in on heat and noise. Some think it's strange that Shaw watched the remains of his mother being burned, but if it were me, my bones, I wouldn't mind. Others making a moment of it, the materia, the fire of life forcing change, the way mothering this boy has worn us both to something precious that glints, if a bit battered around the edges, like a favored antique spoon reached for from the drawer of all others. The door of the furnace is wonderful. It looked cool, clean, sunny, though no sun could get there. Nails and ashes and samples of bone. My son wants to see into it, the bird, its stopped clockwork, the real thing. People are afraid of it, but it is beautiful. Shaw laughed and felt his mother laughing right behind him, her feet to the flame, bursting miraculously into ribbons of streaming, smokeless scarlet. Sifting dust, the hours, my son and I inspect death, little tongues in our hands, little handles without misgiving, scattering ourselves eagerly across the garden, sudden wings and the shadow of a bird passing over, sweeping us up into its sieve as if to say, "O grave, where is thy victory?" All right, so I thought I'd read a poem from my book, The Couple Who Fell to Earth, CNR Press, and this was Catamaran, so I should say their names too. All right, shout out to independent presses and to the work Jen Mervin is doing at Pagination Books. I think I'm gonna have to get in the car and do a road trip to out there to see her and the books and the store and all of that. We'll see how things go in this world of ours. So this is a piece called How Like Marriage is the Season of Flowers. And so that's a nod to James Merrill's Cloud Country. Because I'd forgotten I'd shoved that wrinkled bulb into a slit of dubious soil last winter, just as I'd lost sight of it, buried under a decade of rust and oil in the garage we haven't cleaned since the summer our daughter was born. Some seasons prove more hazardous than others, and one wind-thrashed night, I groped for a stray cigarette from the grime atop the busted refrigerator we used to store light bulbs and toilet paper, slipped my fingers into a filthy halo of booster seats and nursing pillows, formula bottles and plastic bathing tub, and pulled out a crumpled baggie of bulbs. Now, now the garden gnome winks through a lattice cross of immaculate light. So smug in his weird cone hat and Santa coat, his bed of broad conceptions, stigma and stamen, the once frozen loam having cracked like an egg, the stone exterior unrolled, the barracks collapsed, and out slithered the serpent of a single red bloom like a prisoner climbing the roof of the impossible panopticon, and lighting a match to herself becomes a flag of fire in the moon's glowing lake. Good night. Death had no dominion after all. If Christ rose, no one really knows how he managed to wade through all that festering, flying from tomb to feathered clouds, do they? Beauty needs no apology. We could never explain the crumbling citadel transformed to Easter morning goodie basket, blue lace and tangerine jelly beans, nor the scary bunny heads my husband and I sometimes wore, spitting bitter carrots into the whites of each other's eyes. The garden is a Chagall guarded by worms in the vaults of subterranean ruins. The horses, delirious from so long in the desert of no water, their mouths turn to mines of glittering salt and make pictures. A woman wakes and sees a girl wandering the yard, remembers hiding treasure once and pretending to find it, as if for the first time, as if pulling a bouquet from the barrel of a hat, from slugs and dirt, the miserable bottom, your darkest places imaginable. So I have a new manuscript that I'm just finishing, and I'm going to read a couple poems from that and then hand it over. So Nightmares and Miracles, leaning a little bit more into the miracles tonight. But here's a poem. It's a sonnet from my brother. It's called Columbarium. I should visit my brother's grave more often, bring a simple sprig of daylilies, make a tidy corsage of sweet peas, and pin it to the iron lapel of his name, prom date, esque and formal. But the cross is so complex, and my innards ever channeling, my blood buckles under rain, little corpuscle asses that kick and bray along their burdened route, inciting my veins' better sense. Brother, when they burned you naked in the oven, didn't light have the last word? Riled flames painting orange red heat over a canvas of skin, your bones bright fire, the final womb. Once you'd rush to catch sun sliding late into the sea, for you, the only God worth worshiping. So this is a poem for my son, Emmett. Through a window in winter, for my son post-top surgery. And the epigraph goes, and so she comes to dream herself the tree, which is from Heart Crane. The sycamore has shaken off its leaves, sheared and smooth, the trunk festooned, stained a pale and subtle tea color, shape of party balloons. What a pleasure, says our son, to take in rain and light unfettered. What joy to glide 2 palms down denuded plains. No slalom or mogul riot, no commotion of brown or verdant peaks. An honest presence, bathed and beamed in overflow of moon. A baby could drink and drink, launched from its mother realm that way, shivering and perfect. Oh tree, oh bare and startled beginning. I think I'm gonna end with that. Yeah, I think I'm gonna end with that, Jen, and hand it over to Jamaica.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. So beautiful. I was actually just retyping that line. A baby could drink and drink, launched from its mother realm that way. What a gorgeous image. Thank you for that beautiful reading. Yeah, and thank you for the miracles. I think you're right. We need all the miracles we can, for sure. Well, I would love to invite Jamaica. Hey, there you are. Fellow Midwesterner for the moment, at least. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I thought I might share just a quote from Marvin Bell. Before we begin, just in response to Michelle reading to Dorothy, which we had talked about in our meeting, which is sort of like that quintessential poem. And I remember every time Marvin would give a reading, he would look directly at Dorothy and recite it by heart from the front of the stage directly to her. And I don't think there would be a dry eye in the place. And I think, yeah, I mean, I just can't handle how romantic it is. It's just utterly gorgeous. He says, in asked of what makes a good love poem, he answered, language that engages the mind to free the emotions. And I just love that. So anyway, I thought I would just share that before I introduced our next writer. So Jamaica, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to go ahead and give your formal bio and then turn it over to you. So Jamaica Baldwin hails from Santa Cruz, California, by way of Seattle. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Third Coast Magazine, Prairie Schooner, Hayden's Ferry, The Adroit Journal, The Missouri Review, Guernica, which was your recent publication, which was absolutely stunning, and Triquarterly, among others. She was the winner of the 2019 San Miguel de Allende Writers Conference Contest in Poetry and runner-up for the 2020 Tupelo Press Berkshire Prize. Her writing has been supported by Hedgebrook and the Jack Straw Writers Program, and Jamaica is currently pursuing her PhD in English at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where she joins us now. So I'm going to just turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jen. I want to thank you and Pagination Bookshop for hosting us this evening, and Michelle and Rahel for your beautiful poetry. It really is such a pleasure to share space with all of you tonight. And although I miss Marvin, I know he's here in spirit and he'll see this someday. It's hard to put into words what Marvin means to me, but I did not have him for my thesis. I had him my first semester at Pacific, and I was fresh and new and nervous and full of doubt, and Marvin had a lot on his hands. And for 5 months, we exchanged packets with each other. He gave me letters in response to my packets, and you know, they were basically love letters. And at the end of that 5 months, I, was willing to call myself a poet, and I owe that to Marvin. So if you're out there, Marvin, thank you. And when I was thinking of what poem to choose, it dawned on me that I have this broadside of Marvin's that's usually on the wall right behind me. And so I'm gonna read this poem. It's called Yes. We need to think of what might grow in the field from our ashes, from the rot of our remains, from tillage and spoilage, from the watery corn plowed under. We need to picture lilies of the valley and the hard weeds on the mountain haloed by clouds, and the minutest beads of water as they roll up into raindrops to replenish what we relinquished through expiration. We have been breathing in the wild rosebuds and the spore left by those who avoid us. We have been to the sea and the forest to learn who we are. And it is time to say yes to the intangible reach of our being, the stirring that sifts, pans, and rearranges the billion parts of us who once thought we were garners. Marvin Bell. And I want to give a shout out to Open Books in Seattle, which is one of my favorite bookstores where I got this from. So I have selected a handful of poems to read. Most of these are in my current manuscript. This first poem is dedicated to my brother. When I was a boy-obsessed teenager, we're 7 years apart, and he was nature obsessed. And so this poem is for Alfie. Haibun for my brother. While you lined up snails on our linoleum floor to create a path of slime through the house, I was learning how a girl body bleeds without wounding. When you read books about insects, reptiles, amphibians, and mammals, I watched films where girl animals were rescued by boy animals. When you called me outside to show me what you'd found beneath the rocks, I pretended to care and failed. Years later, you'd say it was my eyes that gave it away, the way they darted about as I feigned interest. When you were learning to destroy things and not get caught, I was learning how playing hard to catch, then becoming caught was the point. A distance of 7 years, I couldn't unscore myself long enough to kneel next to you in the dirt, to dip my hands into the earth and pull, content not knowing what I'd find, delighted with the mess, unable to resist the galaxies of life concealed in the dark. I watched you watching. Of nature, this I recall, a young boy, his heart. I've moved around a lot, and this is my first time living in the Midwest, and I really miss the water. Home. It is only October, and already the snow is falling. I watch it change direction with the wind, left, then right, as if seeking like I have been seeking ever since I came to this landlocked place, a body of water, disoriented as I am by the everywhereness of roads. Far from the kelp and seawater that raised me, far from the wet sand my brown toes once claimed, damming each delicate sand crab river. Of course, they would come up for air, wailing their white exoskeletons at me, those creatures who taught me to burrow, to retract my appendages when threatened and become shell, taught me to still my girl body, to let the water spill round my ashy legs. This only after I stopped running from the water's edge. Once I understood the waves would not continue their chase, that some mother had her hand on the ocean's collar too, was I able to relax with my own, the two of us. Mother and daughter resting our brown and white together under the sun like eucalyptus bark, multicolored and choked up by the sea. I was mesmerized by how willing her skin was to leave her, would make a game of it, peeling layers of dead in the largest pieces I could manage. She'd laugh, shrug her shoulders out of my curious fingers. Why don't you go catch sand crabs or build a castle or something? But it was the nearness of her that mattered, as I sat prying a fortress from her body, one translucent layer at a time. This poem is titled Father Weaver. If he wasn't janitor, he'd be gravel artist, he'd be glitter farmer, he'd groove skate down Beach Hill to Isley Brothers. If he wasn't janitor, he'd be tennis racketeer, ocean tamer, cicada sequencer. He'd turn his knit cap upside down to catch fireflies, load them into pitching machine, point upwards and shoot stars into sky. If he hadn't been liquor undertaker, booze regulator, drunk gambling wish denier, he might have been daughter wrangler, fear whisperer, sweet lullaby impersonator. His underwater voice might have sung me to float and swell. If he hadn't been vodka foreman, he might have used strands of daughter hair to draw maps of blackness onto his back. He might have watched them stretch and curve and maze him into father quest, into secret daughter mission. I'd pack a flashlight and meals for the trip. I'd stretch and nimble get. I'd compass take, whistle and song and song. I'd path follow and lost get and around turn, till I center reach and undead him. This next poem was actually from a poem that I wrote when I was at Pacific, and it's after a poem by Vivi Francis from her amazing book, Forest Primeval. All That Splendor, after Vivi Francis. Watching them work, I want to take flight. Spiders, with their courageous trapeze swings, spinning worlds so easily broken by that goofy-footed thud we call walking, that avalanche of body. This isn't always an accident, the breaking of webs like football players through game night banners, no. Sometimes you just want to ruin something perfect to see how quickly it bounces back. Tell me you haven't wanted to tarnish, to dull down all that ferocious effort. I've rearranged myself, folded and been cut along the edge and opened like a paper snowflake till every part of me is an entrance. I've seen what happens when you leave all that splendor out in the open, hanging from bush to bicycle rack. slivers of translucent shimmers just begging to be pulled apart. I'm going to end with this next poem that was recently published in World Literature Today. It's called Windfall. Sometimes I am reminded that so many of the references I carry in my body are occupied by white women, and I'm lost in an ocean of memories, worlds beneath worlds of ocean that should be kept hidden. As all sacred things we want to keep from being policed must be kept hidden, like language. Once I learned Morse code, spent a weekend at Pigeon Point Lighthouse with a ham radio, tapping greetings to kids in Russia, then waiting for their response in return. When I think about lighthouses, I think of us eager to reach across borders, or that Sinead O'Connor song about the woman forever waiting for her man to return from sea. But when I think of men who disappear, never to return, there's always the image of my father, who made a practice of it, until leaving was the one thing he perfected. In death, he's become a soft-spoken man, not silent, but quiet, not a whisper, but a windfall. When he speaks, I'm only a kid reaching. I'm a woman alone in a lighthouse with underwater memories, always waiting. Some nights I search my body with a flashlight for signs of a future. Light, we've been taught, is how we find each other in the dark, the omnidirectional lens, guiding boats away from dangerous edges, the North Star, the moonlight, a point of reference to cling to in the dark emptiness of night. Dark, empty. The language they ascribe to our bodies is made of the same shadow and warning. It's no wonder they fear us. No wonder my father at 63 was a miracle. No wonder night, like his body, has been riddled with the language of dread. But light isn't the surest way home. We've grown accustomed to the ease of it, as if ease was the point of living, grown idle in our new skins, forgetting our nocturnal ways. Every now and then in a dream, I remember what it felt like to see in the dark, beyond what the light reveals, to see how perfect we all are in the absence of its confident gaze. I've never seen a night unpolluted by light, never loved a body that wasn't held up to light scrutiny, but I'm learning. Last night I ate in the dark, closed the blackout curtains and touched my body in new ways, remembered to be grateful, remembered what Toni Morrison said about impenetrable whiteness, that such illusions are sinister and lazy. I remembered that shadow is only ominous because language made it so. I swear to you, listening to Nina Simone in the assiduous dark will shatter you on a cellular level. This is real. This is the ocean of what we've lost, inscribed in night's unfolding. Not an eek, but a bellow, a darkness so rapturous it blinds. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamaica. I felt like I needed a beat there after listening. Thank you so much for the gift of your work. And thank all three of you for such incredible readings. I want to invite Michelle and Raquel back. I'm just ready to just, take as much time as we need to have a conversation. I think we should just go for it. What a privilege to listen to each of you share your incredible poetry. I'm very inspired. I'm incredibly moved. I thought I would open our Q&A session with a question inspired by Marvin Bell. So he shares what what he calls the secrets of poetry. So these are the 3 secrets that he identifies. First, one learns to write by reading. Number 2, I believe that language compared to the materials of other art forms has only one thing going for it, the ability to be precise. And third, and he says the most important secret is, if you do anything seriously for a long time, you get better at it. So I wondered if I could just open by asking maybe what your secrets are to writing poetry, or maybe your response to Marvin Bell's 3 secrets.
Abandon and then precision, right? Kind of, maybe. Yeah. I mean, one of the great gifts that Marvin, besides his 32 things about writing, I always share that with my students. I love that. And then I remember these 3 tenets, and then, yeah. So one of the great gifts he gave me, and I know many others, is after we had graduated, we could write with him every night for a month. And the rules were, you write and you don't censor, and you don't, you really write with abandon. You don't because it's all about like the bad stuff. You have to write the bad stuff, and you have to just do it. And then, the nuggets and the flashes start to come up. So, yeah. So not precisely, but I also know that when it really came down to it, with finishing or abandoning poems and manuscripts, it was like the brutal sentence, or the as lean and mean and as precise and shimmering as the line could be, or the phrase or the sentence. So both of those things, right?
I remember in his generous letters that he would send every packet, he was always pushing me to look for the opening that would allow me to expand and to go bigger. Because I came in and I was very, sorry, I don't know how to turn that off. I came in and I was very, I wanted to learn, I wanted to read all the classics, and I thought I had to have certain information. And he wasn't, saying I don't ever read those, but he just kind of said, why, right? He just wanted me to, like Michelle saying, to just get it all out there. And, it's like, your impulses are strong, just put it all out there and worry about the rest of it, worry about all that craft stuff kind of later. And I so appreciate that, because I think, especially my first semester, having somebody like Marvin give me that permission to just go larger was really helpful. So.
Yeah, I don't think that I've ever sat down to write a poem or gotten through a day at USC or a class or an essay and not had somewhere in the back of my mind, learn the rules, break the rules, make new rules, break those rules. Keep expanding outwards, just keep reaching, that every word we put down should be that one step farther that we can go into this radical place of just letting ourselves step out on the ledge of poetry and then over it. So just be the glass that's full and then overfull and spilling down. I think that's the key to what has made and will continue to make Marvin such an amazing teacher, is to keep pushing to that place where there are no rules, and as Michelle said, just abandon. And before I move on, I just want to thank you, Michelle and Jamaica. Your poems were just gorgeous, just beautiful. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
You too, Rahel.
Yes, and I'm still reeling from the readings, and the 2 questions that are appearing in the webinar are Both say no questions, just gratitude. No questions, but thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I hope you feel all the gratitude coming at all three of you. I'm curious, you all have been writing for a long time. I'm curious if there, I think in the life of a writer, we have sort of these moments that change us, or are kind of turning points in our writing life, or key recognitions that happen along the way. And I would just love to hear from each of you, maybe like what you consider maybe those moments or those experiences or those books, or something that really you felt like was one of those landmark moments in your life as an artist.
Well, so without getting, sort of launching into a big, origin story about becoming a writer, I loved writing poetry, but I was a theater major and I was a dancer way, way, way back when. But I ended up strangely doing not strangely, but I was captivated by Federico Garcia Lorca when I was a theater major. And so I ended up writing my thesis, whatever, at in the drama program at UC Berkeley on poetry and the plays of Federico Garcia Lorca. And those poems and Robert Bly's Leaping Poetry, along with Dylan Thomas, it never left me. And even though I didn't really dive fully into poetry until later, it just that for whatever reason that worked. That there was just no, I had to come back to it. And I did.
I think for me, I don't know if there was been a breakthrough moment since I've been writing, but I think for me, the breakthrough was just coming into the writing in the first place. So kind of similar, I guess, a little bit to Michelle, but yeah, my mom wrote, and she was pursuing a degree in writing when I was young. So it was never something that I was focused on or thought I would do until much later. So for me, it was the thing that brought me to the writing that I think was the breakthrough. Yeah.
So I'm in my midlife crisis. That's what this is. I started writing poems when I learned how to read. I taught myself how to read when I was about 3 and immediately started writing poems. I wrote poems my whole life up until I met my ex-husband, and he thought it was kind of a not great thing to say, to do. So it's like a big understatement. I stopped writing when I met him. I went to Israel. I became religious. We got married. We had 6 kids. I probably wouldn't have survived the whole thing without the creativity that it takes to raise children. I have my 3rd daughter has cerebral palsy. That took pretty much everything that I had in helping her. That's what brought me back to Israel during the pandemic. I was living in Los Angeles, and all of a sudden in 2009, I was, there were no more babies in the house, and I was starting to really feel that. And I thought, oh, I'll raise dogs, or all these crazy, like really crazy ideas. I don't even like dogs that much. So all these crazy ideas were occurring to me, and then all of a sudden I said, wow, I can do that thing that I used to do. I can write poems. And it's a lot easier to write poems online, but if there hadn't been that magic connection of the internet, I don't know how it would have worked. But online workshops, and then more online workshops, and then one workshop with Carolyn Forche, who said, you've got to do something about your career. I was like, what? I thought I was just writing some poems. She encouraged me to go and get my MFA. When I said to her, how can I possibly get a master's degree when I don't have a bachelor's degree? I never finished college. She said, Louise Gluck doesn't even have a high school diploma. And look at her. Okay. And now look at her, right? Okay.
Can I say one more thing? Going off of what you've all said, you know, it occurs to me that there's also stages, right? There's stages of development, of, you know, psychological and emotional development. And when you say midlife crisis, you know, there's when sometimes the need to make art or to write involves trauma or breakage. Right? You kind of get to a certain point in development, and then things cave in again, and you have to keep you know, kind of like what we're going through now. So for me, you know, my older brother's suicide and my son being diagnosed with autism, being married for a couple of years, and kind of suddenly all of these things happening and being, yeah. So, and then, you know, even though it was Dylan Thomas and Robert Bly and the Leaping Poetry and the Three Brains and all of that, that I really needed, I was hungry for, and it just never left me. And and Dylan Thomas, all that. When I got to that place of really diving in, you know, in that kind of like diving into the wreck, right? It was the Cora of, it was the realm of the mothers, right? That sort of Dorianne and Kim and Sexton and Olds, right? So that then, and Clifton and, you know, this, that sort of became like the holders and the bearers, right? Or the midwives of kind of into the next, putting it together, remembering and all of that. So just wanted to say that too. It seems like it goes in stages sometimes.
I love that idea of writers sort of midwiving us into our own writing practice. I mean, each of you sort of shared that you were reading before, you know, I mean, this is how writers are birthed, you know, through reading. And I love that image of those key voices that we read, sort of birthing our, you know, midwiving our art. Thank you all for sharing about your journeys. I really appreciate that. I think it makes a lot of sense to me that Marty Madia, who is our fellow family member at Pacific, is asking a question that I had written down actually too, Marty, about the relationship between music and poetry, which is something that Marvin Bell also writes quite a bit about. And I'm just going to share her question. Jamaica, your voice shifts among your poems. One that has a singular voice in tonight's reading is the amazing one about the father if he wasn't a janitor. Can you talk about the music and rhythm of that poem, where it came from? And I would love to hear that answer, and then maybe even from each of the others, you know, if and how music plays a role in your own work.
Thanks, Marty, for the question. That poem was one that I wrote, I think, early in the beginning of the pandemic. And I've struggled to write, most of my writing life, I've struggled to write poems about my father, who passed away when I was at Pacific in 2015. I didn't know him, we weren't super close. And so when I was writing that poem, I've written poems about the hardship, and I've written poems about his alcoholism, which that one includes. But I wanted to write a poem that kind of imagined who he could be if alcohol wasn't a factor in his life. And it just sort of went that way, you know. There was this idea of the maze and the map, and like I was going on a trek to kind of uncover this father who was never there, and I couldn't write it straight, you know. By that I mean I found this voice coming in that just needed to kind of do it a little inverted in a way. And I think once I discovered that, which happens towards the end in the last stanza, that rhythm made a lot of sense to me. And then it came in, and then I think I went back to the earlier parts of the poem and kind of revised to make sure that the poem was kind of following that rhythm. So yeah, it was definitely a discovery in each point in the creating of that poem. It was kind of, oh, this is what's happening and this is what's working. And then I would kind of go back to do that. So that was the first poem. It's a really, it's dear to me because I think it's the only poem I have where I have written about him, and it's not just about, you know, the absence or the death or the alcoholism. And so I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah, music is a huge part of my poetry. It's been very hard for me to write since I got accepted at USC. I think it's because my writing went from being something that was fun to being all of a sudden something really serious. And that's been really scary. And figuring out how to step into this new role that I'm playing after 30 odd years of mothering and working in the business world, poems coming much more now from intention and having to pull the music in after. But the poems that are in Salam, the poems that I wrote before, all came from there's a voice that just talks to me and sings to me. And it's that little tiny bit of music that is the hook that I hang my chain on when I am going into a poem. Figuring out the music comes first and the words come after, and then I look down at and say, oh, that's what this means.
Yeah, music always wins, and that's a Marvin, right? Music always wins. And yeah, it's not separate from the meaning, and you build for the, you don't build, it's not the other way around. I guess that we could argue, or we could argue that, but I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah. The language follows the music.
I love that. And to me, that's something that's so unique about poetry, you know, specifically, is that just that attention to sound and image, and that relationship is always so fascinating to me as a lone prose person, sort of, you know, listening to this in awe. You know, we're coming at about an hour and a half. I would love to ask just maybe two more questions, or see, you know, maybe if you all have questions for each other as well. But one thing I did want to make sure to get in was just asking you about your current projects, what you're all doing now, what is energizing you in your creative life. You know, we're all writing, you know, as each of you have sort of talked about in your own way, you know, from this space where everything's different, the world is different, the world is in crisis. You know, what are you doing now? What is sustaining you? What projects are you working on, or what practices are keeping you going?
Trying to survive, trying to be present. And I know this has been tossed around a lot, but I have to remind myself, radical acceptance, not acceptance of the way things are, because I think we need to fight radically against a lot of what's being done and how is trying to be furthered. But you know, like in sort of a Buddhist way, you know, just like this is what's happening, and then to try and write through that and try and find the beauty, and so it's hard, you know, it's hard, and I know for me the best thing I can do is to keep writing, to keep reading, and mostly to keep my attention on my students and young people, because then I'm not, you know, kind of caving in and worrying about myself so much, taking care, but trying to be generous through it. because, you know, I get concerned. About others.
Agreed. I think for me, the reading is saving me. So I'm in the middle of my comps, and it's a lot of reading, and it's a lot of returning to some of my old favorite books, and new ones, new critical books. So I'm just trying to, for me, is less time, you know, thinking about or listening to the news, and more time listening to the voices of the writers that are on my lists. And then, you know, it's impossible to keep all the news out, and I want to know some bits of it. And I think when I do hear kernels of things that are going on in the world right now, having the stuff that I've been reading helps me to kind of, it keeps me from freaking out, you know, I guess is a good way of putting it. So yeah, that's mostly what I've been doing, besides teaching, is focusing on the comps and just writing, you know, when I can.
And you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of editing work too, right?
Well, not really editing, but I'm coordinating the Sillerman book prize for African poets, and then I do the Prairie Schooner book prize in the fall, but right now it's the Sillerman. So if there's any African poets reading and you don't have a book published yet, please submit. Yeah, so that ends, it's open now, and that ends December 1st. So yeah, and that's really fun. And then I've been interviewing some of the African poets who are featured in the most recent African Poetry Book Fund box set book that just came out. And so I've been interviewing them, and that's been a real, I've never interviewed before, and so that's been really fun to get to know them. Yeah.
And you're doing a great job. They're beautiful, beautiful interviews, really great.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. They're amazing. Yeah.
So I feel really lucky to have schoolwork. I look around me and I see people who are unemployed, people who are stuck, you know, we're all stuck at home. And I'm just so happy to have the words of poets and scholars who came before me that I can lean into during this time. My experience at USC has opened me up to a horizon that I really didn't plan for, that came about in an early class, we were studying Shakespeare plays and opening out the play by looking at a single word. And we had to choose a word in the semester, and I had a young graduate student had come to me because she was having trouble with her period. And so she chose the word blood that the day we had to choose our words. And so I just chose the word menstruation. And from that, I'm now probably going to be writing my dissertation on menstruation in literature, menstruation in poetry. I'm also, like Jamaica, coming up on my field exams. So I'm writing about menstruation in Shakespeare, which, listen to this, there is almost no scholarship about how Shakespeare handled menstruation. Okay, 400 years of scholarship about Shakespeare, and yet here is this great erased place. Everywhere I turn, this aspect of something that we females go through every month, erased, not talked about, taboo. So I'm looking at shame, affect theory, writing about the taboo. So many scholars. I'm also in illustration, and I'm curating an anthology. Right now, we're calling it the Aunt Flo 2020 Project. Hopefully, that name will change when we find a publisher. And we just finished today. My partner, the poet Jen Saunders, who's also a Pacific graduate and friends with all of us, she and I just finished going through the submissions today, and that was very exciting. So glass of champagne, and we will start putting together the manuscript and starting to look for publishers. So it's been a very, very exciting time of looking at how women post Me Too, coming out of our shells, this next wave of feminism, who we are, and how we're looking at ourselves and our bodies at this time.
Great time. So much going. Yeah. That's
I'm
great.
excited for that anthology.
Yeah, I need that anthology in my life. Absolutely. And I think all of your work touches on that in some way, the body, our relationship with the body to the world, how the politicized body. And yeah, that is so fascinating considering all the tomes of Shakespeare research on Shakespeare, but sadly, it doesn't really surprise me either somehow. I want to thank you all. We're at an hour and a half, which I think is probably a good portion of time. I just want to thank all of you for the generosity of sharing your talent, your wisdom, your time. It breaks my heart because there are some beautiful questions in the Q&A. So I wanted to encourage those of you who asked amazing questions to reach out to the writers. A lot of the questions came from our dear friends and family at Pacific. So hopefully we know ways to get a hold of each other. And if you can't, you can always email me at paginationbookshop.com and I can pass along your beautiful messages that you've been sending throughout the reading and throughout the evening. I just wanted to thank you, Raquel, for organizing this and getting us all together and being such a leader in so many ways. And thank you, Michelle and Jamaica. And good luck to all of you with your tests coming up. And Michelle, I'm feeling you with the student work. It's saving me. And it's a lot.
Also really gnarly Scandinavian noirs.
Ooh.
And playing the bass too. Yeah, those are good. All of it.
Nancy was asking a question about your bass, so I'm so glad that snuck in there. So Nancy, yes, that is her bass.
It's so good. It's a great instrument.
Yes, such multi-talented women. What an honor to be just ahead among you in a group. It's such a privilege. So, well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We will, of course, have this interview and readings available on Pagination's Facebook page, so feel free to revisit it. Feel free to share it. I encourage you to share it with others. If you have any questions about finding work by these amazing authors, I hope you email me at paginationbookshop.com, at gmail.com. Well, anyway, you can find me anywhere really, or Instagram or Facebook. We currently have an event plan in November. We're still planning around the dates, but our next featured writer is going to be the cartoonist Josh Neufeld, who is also a teacher at the Solstice Low Residency MFA and has been an editor of a recent book of graphic essays about quarantine and the corona crisis. So we're going to talk to him about graphic narrative in this time, which I'm really excited about. So keep your eye out for that event page coming up as soon as we land on a date in November. But thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Pagination. Jen Mervin, who has graduated with us and went on to open up this beautiful bookstore and to be able to host all of us tonight. This has been amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks to Jamaica.
Have all of you come here, stay at my house, and do a big reading and workshop.
We're doing it. Yeah. It's happening.
Yes, we're keeping that. That's going to happen. Love to you all. Thank you so much. And our love to Marvin. I hope that he is feeling all of our gratitude throughout this whole evening. So thank you all. Okay, have a lovely night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.